Welcome everybody. Tonight we're going to cover what is a licensed land surveyor. So we're going to cover a couple different topics. So what is a licensed surveyor? What services can they perform? The education and experience that's required, what exams are required to take, and how long is a license typically good for. So again, my name is Chris, and I'll be your host tonight. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to be alerted to all the new videos and content coming out. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So what is a licensed land surveyor? So a licensed land surveyor is a professional surveyor, is an accredited professional who conducts land surveys to measure and to define real property and its boundaries. The professional may denote their certifications basically as a PS, an LS, PLS, RPLS, so it kind of depends on the state you're in. So every state's a little different. They all have a little different acronym. Florida, PSM, but most common designation is PS for professional surveyor. Alright, so what is a licensed surveyor? Basically, it's a professional survey license equals competency. And I got this right from NCSS, but buying or selling property, driving down the highway, walking a public trail, professional surveyors are charged with protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. When it comes to these and other everyday activities, you earn your license and join a community of professionals who are likely to be involved in many of these and other projects from beginning to end. So, jobs determine the location of existing boundaries, parcels in relation to the property description using various tools, equipment, and vehicles such as drones, ATVs, boats. So you'll use a lot of different vehicles or equipment as well. Could be LiDAR system, could be using a robot. There's a variety of different tools and equipment out there. Alright, so what services can I do as a licensed surveyor? So basically you can work as a sole proprietor, a contract surveyor. Many of them are employed by land survey companies. These companies often form a survey basically a survey form, or you'll have like civil engineering firms that have land surveyors that are attached to them as well. There's a variety of different ways you can work in, by yourself. You can work in a small company, work for large national companies, international companies. So it kind of just depends on you, on where you want to work, and then as far as the services, again, you can do anywhere from boundary, topo, as-builts. It's kind of going to depend on where you're working or who you're working for. You can do plats. There's just a variety of options out there. But basically anything that deal with the land, whether it be selling it or purchasing it, typically a bank will need a land surveyor. Alright, education needed. So first thing is you can't accurately plan to become a licensed surveyor without knowing what state you want to get licensed in and meeting those requirements. So each state has its own requirements, and knowing them will help you kind of accurately set up your timeline. Once you have that, then you can go ahead and proceed forward. So we've had several individuals that will call and have been doing a survey for 10, 15 years, but have no idea the steps to further their career. Some of them, they can do it just based on experience, while others are going to need a bachelor's or an associate's depending on the state. Same thing goes with experience. So just like we talked about, knowing the state you want to get licensed in first is going to be priority. So I have on here, just as an example, is North Carolina. So they have basically a breakdown for you. So bachelor's degree in surveying, 45 semester hours for surveying courses, needs 2 years of experience under a PLS. The associates is 5 years, high school diploma or equivalent, 7 years, and then 9 years if it's a high school diploma. Oh, sorry, it was a high school diploma or equivalent and apprenticeship was 7 years, and then just a high school diploma is 9. And this is for the state of North Carolina. Like I said, every state's going to be a little different. Okay, next. So exams that are required. So North Carolina is very similar to the exams that you'd encounter in all the other states. You'll have several exams to take in order to become licensed. So first, meeting the requirements to take the fundamentals of surveying. So with that, jump back. Basically, a bachelor's degree. This is going to be to become your PLS. The FS is going to be a little different, but typically you'll need, let's say, so Texas is going to be an associate's degree with 32 credit hours. California can do it based on experience, 2 years of experience, or you can have like an associate's degree. And again, every state's a little different. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd be glad to answer it for you. All right, so like I said, once you meet the requirements for the fundamentals of surveying, you can go ahead and schedule that exam, take it. Once you complete it, it's then meeting the state requirements, which comes back to experience. So let's say you have a associate's degree and you have 6 years of experience under a PLS. You can then go ahead and apply for your principles and practices, or in the state of North Carolina, the PS or the mapping services exam. So every state's going to have the PS minus Texas right now. They've only got 2 exams. But you'll be taking your fundamentals, your principles and practices, and then lastly would be your state-specific exam. So in this case, North Carolina. Again, so services that you can provide. Some of the professional services include consultation, investigation, testimony, evaluation, planning, mapping, assembling, interpreting, reliable scientific measurements, as well as information relative to location, size, shape, or physical features of the Earth, man-made or otherwise, even the airspace above Earth or any part of the Earth. So those are the types of services that you can provide as a professional land surveyor. And again, it's going to depend on the company you work for, or if you work for yourself, and what you kind of choose to do, or what your company kind of is involved in. One thing, again, these can be done with different tools, measurements, so you can do them, of course. You can see you'll be doing CAD drafting, you can do it by hand, you'll be taking notes, you could do aerial, you can do LiDAR, GPS. So there's different ways to collect the information and measurements. All right, next, what does your license allow you to do? So each professional land surveyor is bound by the law to protect the public, which means that you are ensuring the property owner do not have public utilities installed on their land and vice versa. So by correctly establishing the property boundaries, you minimize the exposure to risk. Okay, and what do you mean by risk? Well, we'll talk about that next. So what harm could an unlicensed surveyor do? So it gets a little lengthier in here, but basically the importance for a licensed professional land surveyor goes beyond the line or staking a construction site. So land surveyors are often the first professionals on the ground during a variety of projects, such as planned developments, roadways, construction. So surveys are used to ensure that there are no delays in the project or the closing of a real estate transaction. A land survey performed by a professional should include the identification of major features of the land and or pre-existing issues, one of those being incorrect title documentation, encumbrances on the property, and or easements that fall on your parcel. By not properly identifying these, ultimately costs time and money, not to mention the other party that would be involved in the transaction. So again, what is something that a unlicensed surveyor could do to harm you? Well, one, they're not able to actually submit the property or the boundary. They can't officially sign off on it. So in an article published by XYHT on the 21st of March 2015, basically property owner is the most obvious party being damaged with the fraudulent surveys being performed. It affects his or her boundaries directly. A property owner pays a person who he believes is a surveyor for services, expecting these to be performed to the best of the surveyor's ability. A surveyor doesn't have the authority. A surveyor does not have the authority to determine property ownership, but a surveyor does have the authority to give legal opinion regarding the location of a boundary. Knowing this, a property owner expects a survey to locate his boundaries and provide a plat for the work done. If this is not achieved, the property owner does not get a professional service he paid for. An unlicensed individual is stealing from the property owner because part of doing a property survey is giving a client a plat and filing the records required by law. So, like I said, they're not able to actually file it. An unlicensed individual cannot file a record of survey, therefore, he or she cannot fulfill the requirements of a boundary. So, again, depending on what you're doing, who you're working for, but yes, being a licensed professional is always going to be the route to go. All right, one of the other things I always get asked too is how long is my license good for? Well, it kind of varies, same thing for getting licensed on the requirements and education. Every state's a little different. So in Indiana, for instance, um, we'll talk about that in a minute, and then North Carolina and compare those. But first, so your license is it's your number for life unless you voluntarily surrender it, retire it, or if it's involuntary surrendered or revoked for discipline actions. So each state has an expiration date on it in order to keep the license active, which could be accomplished by obtaining the PDHs or professional development hours or CEUs, the continuing education requirements. Just taking the exam, so it's just like taking your exam. Typically you'll have to do 15, 25, depending on, again, on the state, for continuing ed credits in order to keep it active. Every state's different. Again, some of them are yearly, some of them are biannual. Some states do not require CEUs. All right, so Indiana, for instance, continuing education requirements. So 24 hours of continuing education in order, and it's biannual, like I said, so 24 hours of continuing ed, and then it has to meet certain requirements. North Carolina, same type of thing, 15 credit hours are required, but it does have to meet certain requirements. And this is just a brief overview, but basically it has to meet requirements as of Rule 0.1702, Item 4. Let's see, and it has to be by basically a sponsor. Post-evaluation course offered by those sponsors, defined in Rule, same thing, Item 6. Section may result in non-acceptance. So again, make sure that you're getting it from an accredited source before you go and take any professional development or CEU hours. All right, so if you guys have any questions, I know I kind of ran through that fairly quickly, but just wanted to go over what is a licensed land surveyor, what's needed, what they can offer, and the other big thing was, basically becoming licensed and how long your license is good for. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat. Be glad to answer them for you. All right, and just to reiterate real quick, as far as what is a licensed land surveyor, so a licensed land surveyor basically has basically a PS, RPLS, PLS, LS. So every state's a little different as far as how they determine or identify it, but a PS is the most common. There is also PSM for Florida. Again, licensed land surveyor, basically your job as a professional surveyor is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Technically, that is your job. That's your oath. What services can you provide? Again, working for small companies, large companies. You can do contracts, you can do sole proprietor, and then from there it's going to depend on the company you work for, what types of services. But again, for types of services, there's a plethora of information out there, but you can do consultation on investigation, testimony, evaluation, planning, mapping, assembling, interpreting realistic scientific measurements, as well as relative to location, size, shape, physical features of the Earth, man-made or otherwise, even airspace or airspace above. And again, there's tons of tools and equipment that can be used as well out there. So you'll see drones, UTVs, ATVs. You'll see the I-man standing behind the instrument there, but they've got robotic ones. They've got a variety of different tools, LiDAR systems that you can use. So there's definitely a lot of equipment out there. And then again, one of the things that you need, education. So knowing what state you want to get licensed in is priority number one, making sure you meet the state's requirements. Same thing goes for experience. Again, just as an example, we've got North Carolina. So there's a couple different ways in order to become a PLS in the state of North Carolina. A bachelor's degree in surveying, 45 credit hours with 2 years experience. And again, the experience is going to be under a professional land surveyor. So typically who you're going to be working for. AAS degree in surveying technology, 5 years of experience. High school diploma or equivalent with an apprenticeship is 7 years. And high school diploma or equivalent, 9 years of experience. And again, all that experience is under a PLS to sign off for you. Exams, same thing. Pretty much every state, 3 exams: your fundamentals, your principles and practices, and your state specific. Fundamentals, like I said, meeting the minimum requirements. For instance, Texas, you need a associate's degree and 32 credit hours. California, you can do it based on just experience. I believe it's 2 years, but every state's different. Florida, for instance, needs a bachelor's degree. All right, and then so once you take your fundamentals, you're basically then meeting the state requirements. So in this example, North Carolina, as long as you have a bachelor's degree, 2 years of experience, or high school diploma with an apprenticeship, and 7 years of experience, you then qualify to sit for the next exam, which is your principles and practices. They also offer a mapping services, and then after that, you can take your state specific. All right, so services, we went over this already. A variety of different services can be provided and performed, aerial photography, GPS, combination of methods, your conventional ground measurements. So there's all kinds of different ways of going about it, what services you can provide or offer. So that's going to be, again, depending on you or the company you work for. All right, and then so again, what does your license allow you to do? Basically establish property lines for the company or the individual, the owner, whatever it might be. Sorry about that. All right, and reason becoming licensed, basically you are not able to file a record of survey if you're not licensed. So you're not performing a true boundary survey for an individual. You may be able to go out and find the property corners and everything, but it can't be officially recorded. So make sure that you're always licensed or working for a licensed land surveyor when you're providing these services. And lastly, again, how long is your license good for? So every state's a little different. Some states require no continuing ed. Other states will require annually or biannually typically. So Indiana, for instance, on this one, 24 credit hours biannually, so every 2 years. You need to meet the requirements for the 24 credit hours. And they have, standards as well. So you can't go and just take any classes. So minimum of 6 continuing ed hours in a mandatory topic as defined in Section 6, or a minimum of 18 continuing ed hours in elective topics that they cover. So again, they've got set rules on what they will or will not allow. Same thing goes with North Carolina, but they require 15 credit hours every, let's see, every year it looks like. Yep, so every year, every renewal period, sorry. And again, same thing, so they've got certain requirements they have to meet. So it has to meet according to Rule Point 1702, Item 4. So covers what all you need. So that covers pretty much what is a licensed land surveyor for you guys. Again, thanks for joining us tonight. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Or if you have any topics you want us to discuss, feel free to leave it so we can look at doing some new ones next year as well. Again, my name is Chris with NLC Test Prep, and we'll see you again next month, and we'll talk about top drones for land surveying. So we'll talk about a couple different ones they offer, and pros and cons of them.